Previously on XenoChat, Justin, David, Owen, and I discussed the various religious aspects to the Xeno series, and this is the conclusion to that discussion, and it picks up where we left off with our discussion with the Xenosaga series. Enjoy.
Xenosaga kind of brings in is miracles. I don't know if you know anything about that at all.
Well, miracles are that was the big thing about Jesus Christ, right? I think they reference Jesus as like the miracle man, as like a miracle man or something, or miracle worker or something.
Well, here's the thing. So it doesn't really. So Jesus is in Xenosaga, but it doesn't really take a lot of like influence from the actual Gospels.
Yeah.
So what Xenosaga is more interested in is actually Acts and like the founding of the first century Christian church and stuff like that.
All right. Yeah.
In the book of Acts, the apostles are able to perform miracles similar to what Jesus was able to perform.
Yeah, in the gospel that's attributed to their receiving of the Holy Spirit and like being able to actually go out and do the spread the good news, which is the message of, and that's like,
and so, but like they do it through like their hands, like I think Peter heals a lame man, and by like lifting him up. And his, like, ankles are healed or whatever. But since you played Xenosaga 1, you remember the scene where Chaos touches the Gnosis, and the Gnosis just disappears?
I do remember that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Chaos is, like, he's affiliated with Christ in some way. Because he has the ability to perform those miracles.
Yeah,
and I'm not exactly sure... Yeah, he's called that, but it's kind of weird.
Is it?
I know they use the word Yeshua in that. I think Yeshua.
They do use the word Yeshua, which is kind of weird because Yeshua is Jesus.
It's another way you could say Jesus, but it's also a bunch of. I looked it up earlier. It's like it's a common alternative to the name Joshua in later books, Hebrew Bible. It means like Jesus. Yeah, so it's weird.
So I mean, again, I'm not the best to comment on this, but I always thought of like both Yeshua and Chaos and Jesus as like the same being, one being the physical person and one being the spiritual figure.
Yeah, that's kind of how I interpreted it too when I first played it, but I remember being kind of confused for the same reasons you guys just stated.
It's confusing because so there's a couple of things in some guidebooks. I'm not really sure, but I don't think they were the same person.
They are not.
They're not.
It's
they definitely.
The way I understand it, Jesus Christ is seen as like the mouthpiece, and he's like the miracle worker, but the words are actually fed to him by Yeshua, and that becomes Lemageddon.
Yeah, which I always saw like. Yeah, the Lemageddon is basically Xenosaga's analogy for, like, the written word.
Yeah.
So, like, it's interesting how they use that because, like you said, not everybody follows, the written word, like, exactly. You know what I mean?
There's
different
ways to interpret it.
In Xenosaga, the Lemageddon gets lost in the UMN, and they have to piece it back together. And so, it's like that thing where it's just, time changes things.
Yeah.
So it's just like the original meaning of the words were forgotten. It says that somewhere.
Huh. Interesting.
It's in either one of the Xenosaga lore books or it's in the database. I can't remember which one. But it says that the original meaning of Yeshua's words were forgotten, and but basically that's Xenosaga's analogy for like the written scripture, and that's the thing about like that's why Xenosaga like appeals to me. Like it feels like very like tangible.
Sure.
Like all that stuff. But
I mean, like there's all this like me playing Xenosaga last was like also a conscious choice because I knew that there was so much extra supplementary work and I'd never get to Gears at that point. So having
that is the thing about Saga is that it is definitely the hardest Xeno game to piece together.
Yeah,
like
well, that's fun for me. So all fun.
Yeah, and that's that. I mean, it has been all fun. I've had a blast with it, but like there's a bunch of stuff that I've read that people have said, but I don't really think is true. Like the identity of Wilhelm. Like they kind of see him as some sort of historical figure, but there's nothing that says that. Anywhere.
It's mostly I believe that I can't remember. I've only seen Meek's videos on this. It's said that I think they say somewhere that it was Wilhelm that crucified Jesus Christ, and still a lot of people assume that he assumed the role of Julius Caesar.
See, but it doesn't really say that.
It doesn't? Huh.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't say that anywhere. And so, like, I'm wondering where people got this idea from, like Wilhelm's identity, because it says that Wilhelm has existed for as long as Yeshua and Christ,
right?
But it doesn't say
they're mortal beings. So
yeah, it doesn't say that. Wilhelm crucified Christ. So, like, he could be Roman. I don't know if he is or not, but, like, there's nothing that, like, explicitly states yes.
Like, I mean, if you wanted, you could also, like, make him Nero, but...
yeah. He could be anybody. He's just a force, and so, like, that's why he's, like, seen as, like, Satan most of the time.
Yeah.
Because he's just, you know...
He's the schemer, the one who does things behind the shadows.
Yeah, and you don't really see that much of him until like the very end, unfortunately. But
strikes me as an interesting character. Well,
yeah, he's interesting, but he doesn't get like that much backstory or anything because he's more like a being.
Well, to kind of go into like philosophy, isn't he also kind of seen as like Nietzsche's interpretation of like the Overman as well?
Yeah, I've heard that as well.
That is one thing I've not looked into. I will have to like again. I've done all this stuff in such a short amount of time, but I still have so much more. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh yeah, definitely read Thus Spoke Zarathustra. I think that's where Nietzsche kind of goes into the topic of the Overman.
I'll probably read I'll probably read at least both Zarathustra and The Will to Power. Both look.
And
yes.
And then the Testaments can be seen as like the horsemen.
Yeah, I knew about that. Like the horsemen of the apocalypse.
Yeah.
Doesn't Chaos make like a quote about the horse, or maybe I'm not.
He does but he makes it in reference to the URTVs. In episode 2, he says something about the can't even remember what he says. Something about, I know famine is a word in the sentence, but I don't know the sentence that he said.
Well, one of the horsemen represents famine, so
yeah, but. It's interesting because Albedo ends up being a testament as well. So
well, I mean the word testament, like we first think about it as like Old New Testament, but really testament really means covenant, and covenant means agreement, and so I think the reason why they become testaments is because they make an agreement with Wilhelm, right?
It is
right
because they need something from him.
Mm-hmm. So it's mostly speaking like the contractual sense, where I mean you could also say that's like making a deal with the devil if you wanted, but
that's that's kind of how I interpreted it, you know, when I played it the first time. Also, Nephilim is a thing.
Yeah.
In Xenosaga, but
I don't know too much.
Really,
I don't know too much about them.
Really.
I just remember that they're mentioned in the first book of Genesis, like the offspring of angels.
They're from the Book of Enoch.
They're Book of Enoch. They're also mentioned in a single chapter in Genesis as the offspring of angels, I believe.
That's what they are.
Are they the offspring of angels and humans?
Yes.
Or...
Okay. Angels and human women. Yeah. That's what it is.
Yeah. It's when men became to multiply on earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of heaven saw how beautiful the daughters of man were, and so they chose for their wives as many of them as they chose. Then the Lord say, My spirit shall not remain in man forever, since he is but flesh. His days shall comprise of 120 years. At that time the Nephilim appeared on earth, as well as later, after the sons of heaven had intercourse with the daughters of man, who bore them sons. They were heroes of old and the men of renown. That's literally all it is in Genesis.
Okay. Well, it's kind of interesting because Nephilim was born a human, but she exists within the imaginary domain, so it kind of connects.
Yeah,
I can see it.
For sure. Also, the Song of Nephilim, which I don't fully understand.
You'll figure it out. I think
it's like a literal song, but it's also like a part of like Proto Merkaba and.
Yeah, it's kind of a place. Yeah, too.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah.
Well, I mean, before we move on to Xenoblade, I think we definitely feel like we should talk about, Cosmos being Mary Magdalene.
Yeah, that's a pretty clear. So Xenosaga uses Cosmos, Mary Magdalene as like two beings, where Telos is her body and Cosmos is her spirit, right? So
right.
Yeah, Mary Magdalene is a very prominent figure in the Gospels. She's kind of like this. I think she's first encountered as like she's like seen as a sinner, and a lot of people she like kind of serves Jesus, and a lot of people are like, why would you let the sinner do this to you? But Jesus shows her a lot of compassion. Mary Magdalene was one of the people who saw the angels at the tomb, I believe. I'm looking into the Gospel right now. I believe that's correct though. You can talk stuff if you want.
I was wondering, because in Xenosaga they make a big point of the maiden of Mary Magdalene being such a prominent character, but that's not really the same in the religious sense, is it?
Well, there's you have to understand that there's two Marys. There's the mother of Jesus, Mary.
Yeah.
Right.
She's the virgin. She's that's where Zohar gets its name, Marian Kind, child of Mary. And there's Mary Magdalene, who's one of Jesus' disciples, and one of the more important female figures in the Gospels. I don't believe there was a maiden, but I could be wrong.
Mary Magdalene, I think, is a Xenosaga invention to include Xion in the story.
Yeah, there is. There's not.
There's an actual connection or maiden.
Yeah, there's not an actual maiden. I don't think, because because the Gospels very much is like, it's definitely the Gospels are definitely like it's. Jesus is the focal point, and like he passes on. There's this idea called apostolic succession, where he passes he passes the keys to the kingdom to Peter, who becomes the first pope, and those are passed down to the popes, and this is how Ormus is still enduring after thousands and thousands of years because of apostolic succession. I'm
glad everyone is learning new words today.
I definitely am.
Yeah. If I've been silent, it's because I've been looking them up as you guys have been saying them, and I'm looking at no joke. I have so many tabs open of just random stuff you guys have been saying.
Are you confused? If you are, I'm sorry.
No, this is all good stuff though. This is what I wanted. This is why I'm here. I wanted to hear all this stuff.
Yes,
I don't know a lot of it, but yeah.
Yeah, I am an eager listener right now. I cannot really add much myself either.
No, it's definitely okay. This is the first time I've ever talked about this. To get the chance is kind of really nice.
Get it all out.
I've talked Xenoblade with my priest, but I haven't really talked Gears or Saga with anyone. My priest at my school, he's played all three Xenoblade games, so that's gonna be he's a great person to talk to about this stuff.
Oh wow! I would have never expected a priest to be into those games.
Oh, he just likes playing video games. He's played Final Fantasy VII. He's played all these RPGs. It's kind of funny.
That That's amazing. I've never met a priest that's been into video games.
He's a younger
really
he's a younger guy. He was ordained just a couple years ago, but he's really good. He also moderates the Dungeons and Dragons Club at our school, so that kind of tells you what kind of person he is. And I just opened up Luke, Gospel of Luke in it. Yeah, so Mary Magdalene, Joanna, and Mary, the mother of James, and the others who accompanied them. Also, so like those are the people who saw the resurrection, like the stone rolled away, the angels, and
the witnesses.
Yeah, the witnesses to the resurrection of Jesus. Yeah, and
Okay.
it's interesting how there's predominantly women who saw it. There are definitely women definitely have a place in the Bible. Just kind of interesting stuff.
I kind of wish that the way Xenosaga played out, we got to see more, because there are flashbacks to like Christ and Chaos and Mary and stuff like that, but we don't really see any sort of interaction. Most of the time, there's no dialogue. Pretty sure there isn't any.
What we actually saw was we roughly got I think we almost got in the original plan. I think we almost got to episode 3, I think, or something like that. So
yeah, and it would be nice if Saga and Gears were connected, but
it's not. Yeah.
Well, I mean that's my current project. Linking all the games together. I'll let you know how it goes. I'm sure I'll be taking a lot of creative liberties, but there's a lot of contradictions. The biggest sticking point right now is how Abel is the terminal of Udo in Saga, but then also a mortal man in Gears. So.
The Zohars are different too.
Well, I reconcile that because in Gears they actually modify the Zohar physically, they embed Kadamity into its eye. So they actually change. Yeah. They change they actually do work on the Zohar in Gears. So.
Yeah, the roles of Abel and Ellie are kind of flipped in Saga with Abel and Nephilim.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's weird. It's interesting, at least. Yeah. I mean, but there's still a decent argument you could say that Blade is linked to Saga. Blade is linked to Saga at least. So.
That would be an interesting episode or something to discuss how we could do that. Even though I know it's kind of a taboo subject to bring up sometimes because people.
That would be one of the most controversial episodes we ever.
Yeah, so many people.
And we're talking religion here, so.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm from what I've read and stuff so far, I definitely have the opinion that Gears and Saga are pretty separate.
Yeah.
But I'd like them to be connected in some way, but
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have some of the same ideas that are being shared, and there are parallels, but they're very much their own.
I put a thing in the Lugelbon's Xeno server that you guys should check out. It's talking about how all Bungie's universes are projections from this universal entity created by the creators, and the reaction is, I don't know what's more upsetting, the fact that you have reinvented Gnosticism, or you think that Bungie is God. And it's or you could think of it this way. Bungie is this God you could call it a studio, and that's why everything is similar, because this studio has creative ideas. Yeah, just relate that to Monolith and you have it perfect. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, this has been very enlightening for someone who's looking forward. The next 2 games I want to purchase are the first Persona game and then Xenosaga Episode 2. I'll probably do Xenosaga first, but...
Which Persona? Which version of the
PSP.
first one? Okay.
I know there's music problems with that, but I want to at least try the Snow Queen quest at some point, so...
Right.
Anyway.
Well, good luck finding Xenosaga Episode 3 when you get around to that.
I'm just gonna have to...
Ooh,
I'm just gonna have to exploit my luck. I've had ungodly luck with some of this stuff. I've already said, I just find a copy of Xenoblade when it's at its height, sitting at a decent price in a GameStop, and then I found Black Label Xenogears, also at a pretty decent price. And I've had kind of ungodly luck with this kind of stuff, so... Oh,
watch him go to like a thrift shop and then find like freaking the lenticular Xenosaga 3 for like 5 cents.
Like if you want to know how stupid my luck is, when I was pre-ordering the Switch, I also tried to pre-order the Zelda Special Edition, and they said we don't have any more to give away. I'm like, okay, whatever. And then they realized there was a glitch in their computer system, and they actually had more to give away than they thought they did. And I was at the counter when that did, so I got it.
Oh my god.
So, ungodly luck. Let's go.
I'm telling you, he's gonna find a lenticular Xenosaga 3. It's gonna be dirt cheap.
Yep.
I've got the lenticular, so.
Oh man, I never got that one. I'm so jealous. Okay, is there anything else Xenosaga wise we need to discuss?
Probably, but
well, yeah.
There's so much, but this is the one I know the least about, so I can only say so much. I did actually want to bring up one more thing, actually.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, this is kind of linking to the Eternal Recurrence, but I find it, like, the way that the Eternal Recurrence is portrayed in Xenosaga is very interesting. So, the Eternal Recurrence is obviously, it's something that's been in philosophy since antiquity, so, like I think it was, like, Greek or Roman or something like that, and Nietzsche brings it up in some of his works as well. But there's also there's also you could but none of the Eternal Recurrence arguments that I've seen, or at least I just haven't looked deep enough. None of them really reference the purpose of God in all of it. It's just like this idea that everything will repeat because the universe is infinite and thus we are infinite, and so we'll reincarnate like ourselves infinite number of times. There's something called the cosmological arguments, and these were kind of first started by St. Thomas Aquinas, who's a Catholic philosopher, and he basically he created these 4 proofs for God's existence and said that, for example, the one about cause and effects, everything is an effect, and every effect must have a cause, and you can't have an infinite amount of causes. You can't have an infinite amount of causes, or else you have what's called an infinite regress, which is in a chain of reasoning, the evidence for each point on the chain relies on the existence of something that came before it. So you go back and back into infinity, and you can't really have that, or else it just wouldn't really work, because we know that like the universe started from a singularity. And so Aquinas says, well, he wrote many proofs about the existence of God. This is just 4 of his. He said that like the original starting point is the God, but a lot of people criticize it, saying like this shows like a more colder God, which I guess that would definitely represent Udu, because he's definitely like a colder, like just more like logical fascination. He doesn't really have.
Yeah, it's not like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very passive.
Yeah, very passive.
There's not really. See, the Xenosaga is kind of different than the rest of the Xeno games in the sense that like the world itself doesn't really have an origin story.
Yeah,
like, as it exists.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think Eternal Recurrence like in the game is like an opposite version of what the Infinite Regress is saying, where it's like the reason why we eternal recur is because if we didn't, the world would be destroyed, and like the upper domain would sever its connection with the lower domain to preserve itself. So I feel like that maybe like unintentionally that is a parallel you could draw. I was going to a lot of Catholic philosophy yesterday because I'm me, and that was one thing. I can't
really quite remember what happens with the power of Animus and like the dissipation of the universe. I'm not really sure what happens to the upper domain in that.
The upper domain,
really
so the way how I understand it is, in theory, the upper domain would be destroyed as well, but there are fail-safes installed. I think the Animus is one of them that would sever the connection. So it would just be the lower. It would just be the lower domain that would suffer.
I know that chaos is also a fail-safe.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Fail-safe.
Yeah. It's the I think chaos plays that role. I think he is.
But yeah, I did think that was kind of interesting. Like Xenosaga doesn't have like an origin, like for like the world that the characters live in is just, the future of what's supposed to be us.
Yeah.
As opposed to, like, it's like that in Xenogears, but, like, there's actually, like, an origin story for, like, the planet.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And it's kind of like a new beginning, too.
I do like how in Saga, how the Zohar is found, at least I think in Gears, the Zohar is, like, the origin of all life. I like how in Saga you find it in Africa, where humans are thought to originate from, like before we kind of like spread out and populate the rest of the Earth. That's definitely like a 2001 thing. Yeah, I know it's definitely 2001, but I still like that idea. Like it's in Africa where humanity is evolutionarily supposed to originate from.
Yeah, it does kind of that is really interesting.
Yeah, I've always found that kind of cool.
Let's see. I also find it interesting that trying to think here to make sure that I say this correctly, but there's not really a hell equivalent. There's not really a hell in any of the Xeno games, really. It's kind of...
Yeah?
Yeah, there's not really a hell. So that's kind of an interesting thing to think about as well.
I never thought of that.
The only portrayal of the afterlife really is...
Like, there are upper domains, and people are always trying to get to the divine, but there's never a hell.
I guess the
inverse.
Yeah. Well, I guess the beach of nothingness is kind of like limbo, or it's some type of interpretation of an afterlife, kind of, but
right. But that's kind of an interesting point that there's never like a hell or any kind of, I guess, a punishment for being evil.
Nor is there really a heaven either, really.
Yeah, there's not really a heaven, but like people like there's also there's
higher planes of being, but there's no heaven.
Yeah. Right. So that's kind of really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never really thought of that. Oh, that's really interesting. I'd like to think about it now. Wow.
I'd like to see Xeno tackle purgatory in some time, where it's like this idea that before you go into heaven, you have to be purified.
That's what the Beach of Nothingness feels like, actually, because it's like a mental state sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's where Cherenkov has to like reconcile with himself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Shion in episode 3 as well, if it visits the Beach of Nothingness, because Cherenkov says, "Hey, you're gonna find yourself here sometime." We didn't actually get to talk about that in the Shion episode, and I kind of am disappointed about that. But yeah, Beach of Nothingness does make a return in Xenosaga 3, and
Sweet.
It's a thing.
I remember being moved by Cherenkov's last words and like his story. So the Beach of Nothingness is a very symbolic place. So you can definitely, I could definitely see like how he has to very much come to terms with, because he's like gone through all like these personality reconditioning and stuff like that, and he kind of has to come to terms with who he really was and stuff like that, and like kind of go away from like all the lies that people and he told himself and stuff like that, and really like take himself at face value. I guess that could be seen as like a purification process of a person.
Yeah. And also like the Gnosis too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like the Gnosis are people who reject the singularity of the collective unconscious, so.
Yeah. That's a lot thing, I think. The Pillar of Salt thing. From
I know what you're talking about, but I don't understand the parallel that you're trying to draw.
Like when they kind of like went back, they backpedaled, you know.
Well, I know the story, but I don't like. What are you trying to say in the context of the game?
The game?
Yeah,
like people become pillars of salt in that game.
Did I just
when they're touched? When you're touched by the Gnosis.
Oh,
yeah, when you're touched by the Gnosis.
Oh. Well, yeah,
we're going into spirit form, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Maybe I just misinterpreting that. I just assumed that like they were assimilated into the spiritual realm or whatever, but maybe that's different.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't like always happen. It's kind of
because it depends. Because sometimes if you're touched by Gnosis, you also become Gnosis, or if you're Shion, nothing.
If you're
really
Shion,
happens.
nothing happens at all. But I think that might be because of her special relationship with
Yeah.
Udo. And, like, it's not really super explained, but, like, I guess you can kind of draw that conclusion because she does have a very unique relationship to Udo compared to every other character, because Udo actually is able to speak to her, and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Alright. I got nothing left to say about Xenosaga. That's about as much as I can think of.
Okay, David, can you think of anything? Or?
Well, for the sake of time, we should probably go to Xenoblade.
That's true. All right, well, let's move on to Xenoblade, because definitely I want to hear more about this, because I know that I've heard that, I don't know if it's, because I've heard, like, depending on, like, I can't talk, but, like, with Nintendo, I know they've, like, changed, like, during the translation process, they've kind of taken out some of the religious references, or it makes it more...
Well,
it's so weird. It's weird.
Uh-huh.
Because in Xenoblade 2, they remove a reference, but they also in turn what they replace it with is a completely different reference.
Yeah, because
it's most so in Xenoblade 2, the Ontos is actually called, I have it written down. It's called Uizia in the Japanese version, and those are two completely different concepts, even though they have similar roots.
Oh.
Yeah, so, and if anything, okay, but do we want to go through Xenoblade 1 first? There's not a...
Yeah.
Yeah,
let's start there.
So, this one has the clearest interpretation of what the Gnostic, linear path is. So, like, Zanza is the demiurge, Sophia is meant to be interpreted by Mayneth, and Alvis is the monad, the singular existence that... I didn't mention this before, the monad is a very passive being. Like, he doesn't really care what goes on in the material world. He just is.
Yeah, that's very Udo.
That's
Alvis perfectly.
That's Udo and Alvis and the wave existence, just to a T.
Yeah.
There's not a ton, like, Xenoblade is Xenoblade is much more a story about this, so, like, obviously, actually, I'll go with it, but Xenoblade is much more grounded. It's, they don't introduce the higher concepts until the final act of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a couple things. So, the Monado is the most obvious one. That comes from the word monad. I use the term monad in terms of Gnosticism, but there's actually a couple other interpretations of it, mostly to do with philosophy. The first one is, in Greek philosophy, the monad is seen as, like, the indivisible, like, one that can, like, it's the fabric, it's what the universe is made out of. It's the central base element of what the universe is made of. This is ether in the Xeno series. And because...
dark particles.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so with the Monado, you're literally bending the universe to your will using the fabric of the universe, which is kind of a fun interpretation of it. And then there's also relates to a branch of philosophy called I believe the person who made it is Leibniz or something. This is another thing on Meeks' channel, but it's called monadology.
I'm gonna have a bunch of videos to look up after this.
Oh no, just look up Meeks' channel and, like, okay, you'll spend a good, if you want to go through all of them, it'll take a day or something like that. There's, like, they're like hour-long video essays about what's going on. But the monadology is, like, this idea that there's, like, a god monad, and he has created, like this predestination thing where everything is set in an order. The analogy that he uses is you're, like, in an MMO. You talk to NPCs that represent other players, but they are not themselves the players, just because that's how it is. That's how, like, in Leibniz's view, the universe is portrayed. Like, everyone is, like, isolated, and they interact with each other in a predestined way. It's a really hard concept to grasp that I can't do justice just explaining it like this. But monadology is definitely a thing, and all three of them, the monad of the Greek philosophy, monad of the Gnosticism, monad of monadology, they all apply to the Monado.
Wow.
And then there's also Yaldabaoth, the name of Egil's Mechon. As I mentioned, Yaldabaoth is one of the names of the Demiurge. Specifically, so the Demiurge has a bunch of different names. I think like one of them is Socklus, and Yaldabaoth is the one that you hear the most often. Yaldabaoth, I believe, translates somewhat to as one who wants to become god. So in Egil's case, this makes sense because he literally takes the place of Mayneth and like ascends to himself to become a god, right?
Right.
Like in the most physical sense that you could possibly have in that universe, because everything is God, basically. Yeah, like Xenoblade 1 is probably the lightest on the religious illusions. But that's...
I kind of thought that Cross was really... Well, I mean...
Well, there's side quests in Cross that
the side quests, yeah, kind of, yeah. There's the church and
yeah.
But
yeah.
I think it. Oh,
you go. You go. Please, I've talked too much.
Well, no, I think because I think Justin mentioned this in an episode or something, but it's like the kind of the best parts of the plot are through the side quests in Xenoblade X.
Oh no, yeah, that's almost certainly for sure. I really like Lao. He's my favorite character, but other than that, the plot does not have significance. I also like, just side note, you guys mentioned that Elma is like the protagonist of that game. I personally disagree. I think there really isn't a protagonist, because the main theme is like humanity has to kind of like live in coexistence because they're the only ones left, and so it's really much more a story about humanity as a whole rather than any particular person, and that's why Cross is like super uninvolved, because he's just one cog in the greater machine. Anyway, that's a whole discussion for another thing, but
no, that's a good point.
I just want to offer my 2 cents on that, but
right.
I also just don't think Elma's a particularly interesting character, but that's just me.
But I think that's also a big problem with how Cross is written in general. Because like when people talk about like protagonists for Cross, it's really for like the main story. Like, and I think I made this point before, that the weirdest thing about Cross is, hey, you have the main story and the side quest. It's almost like two completely different stories in a way, because of like how it's structured is completely different. The side quest is more what you're saying about how we're all kind of just working together. We're all just cogs in one giant thing. You got a lot more of that in there, but for the main story, not as much. It's like they're kind of trying to do a bit of both, and it's clear that like Elma kind of gets a little bit more spotlight. So that's kind of why a lot of people kind of just associate her as the lead character.
I just get so mad at X showing all this stuff at the end and then not really elaborating on any of it.
Well, yeah, like I think from what I understand, X's script was supposed to be a lot more in depth, like to be similar to a novel, but they had to change a bunch of stuff, like because they made the project too ambitious or something. Right. And so they cut down a lot of the story. They made Cross a mute, and they made him like a customizable protagonist, and they also added the Nopon. So,
and wasn't L originally supposed to be like a villain character, or
I haven't read anything on that particularly, but I know that like I think Celica was supposed to play a bigger role. There's a lot of actually lines in the files of X that say like her that have interactions with her and Lao, even though you have to get Celica after Lao leaves the party.
Right, and it's weird because like Celica, she's kind of like brought up to be a lot more than she actually is. It's like really blatant that they meant to do more with her.
She's a member of the Clue, which is where the Treon barrier comes from. In the force field that surrounds the Lifehold. X actually, so just real quick, wrapping up Xenoblade 1, there's a lot of like ideas of so Shulk kind of attains enlightenment in that, where he becomes the closest, like he gained, like Faye does this too. I don't know too much about Xion, but they gain like a spiritual enlightenment where they ascend past the demiurge, and that's kind of like their harmony, right? With everything. And Shulk like rejects becoming a divine being and just being him, and that's perfectly reasonable.
Xion rejects eternal recurrence.
Yeah.
In the end, but I don't know. I don't think it's not this. It's not quite the same.
Xenosaga simultaneously has the most Gnostic elements, but the least Gnostic plot points. It's weird. Like, it's just like there's a lot of stuff that runs counter to Gnosticism, but whatever. But yeah, yeah. So Alvis mentions like how how Zanza and Maneth created life in their own image, which is obviously a reference to the Bible and how God created humans in His own image.
Yeah.
I mean, Xenoblade 1 is very much its own self-contained story, but it's a complete story, so I really appreciate it for that. And it offers a bunch of different philosophy that isn't really religiously tied, but it just has different philosophies tied to it. Like the Apocrypha generator. Well, Apocrypha is a term in religion speaking for scriptures that are no longer considered canon in the Bible, or really the religion that you choose. Yeah, but
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so
no, I get what you're saying. The Apocrypha, that's like
I don't have too much.
That's like Enoch and some of the scrolls, right?
Yeah,
like
there's
stuff like that.
There's also
which is kind of funny actually, because I'm not sure if the Dead Sea Scrolls are mentioned in Xenosaga also, but like they do find scripture in a cave and written in ancient Aramaic. Yeah. Very specifically ancient Aramaic, because Junior's like, isn't this ancient Aramaic? It's like, how do you know ancient Aramaic?
Yeah, I've seen that cutscene. Yeah, yeah, that's yeah. I mean, if you like, Apocrypha is analogy is like the Bible has Maccabees 1 and 2, but there's also a Maccabees 3, 4, and I think 5 that are considered non-canon, and those are the Apocrypha. Another interpretation of Apocrypha that is the extra Gospels. So there were 4 Gospels written, and these are the canon ones. So these are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But there's also a bunch of other Gospels that are considered Apocrypha. Some of them just because they weren't popular, and so they kind of just fell out of favor. And they're not wrong. They're just nothing like these are the 4 that became the most popular. But also some of them are wrong. There's a subsect of the Apocrypha called the Gnostic Gospels, and this isn't speaking about Gnosticism, but more about Gnostic meaning coming from the word gnosis, meaning spirit. And from that, the big thing is that a lot of the Gospels want to emphasize, especially Mark, but Luke and Matthew do this a lot too, and to some extent John. They emphasize Jesus' humanity. So Catholics believe that Jesus is 100% mortal and 100% divine at the same time. It's a mystery how that works, but
yeah, that's
yeah, it's a hard concept to grasp. But one of the biggest things we need to understand as Catholics is the idea that Jesus did indeed suffer on the cross, because he is as much human as he is divine. But these Gnostic Gospels, which again means knowledge of spirit, implies that Jesus is 100% spiritual, and so he didn't feel pain, which is wrong. And also there's a bunch of other problems with them, like they claim to be written by people who they clearly weren't, and there's a bunch of other stuff. But that's a brief overview of the Gnostic Gospels that don't really have any direct relation, but that's another way you could see like the Apocrypha, I guess. But like again, one honestly has like the least references. It's very much its own thing, and as I said, there's a lot of philosophy there. It's just a lot less religion.
Okay.
But see, and that's the thing about like Xenoblade X. Like, it's just like I kind of felt like there was like less spirituality in that game, in general.
Yeah, there's well, I mean, so
like there are side quests, and I understand that, but it's not.
There's also but the entirety of chapter 12 is kind of like that actually, where like chapter 11, chapter 12 like deal with a lot of like chapter 11 is very much like an ethical like debate type thing, with like Lau debating with Elma about like who should have made it on the right whale and like whether what was true. And then like chapter 12 like offers like, do we have like the right to recreate our life, because like there's difference between like the God-given bodies and something that we create artificially. actually, for my second playthrough of Xenoblade Chronicles X, I named my character Gnosis, meaning knowledge of the spirit. And then my entire backstory revolved around what I had known about my first playthrough about like the Earth Life Colonization Project, and I integrated him into that story. So it was kind of cool. But X in general is just like they even like name drop Noah's Ark as like the as a direct reference to like how humanity escaped. Exodus, like Project Exodus, is like reference to Exodus in the Bible, which is Exodus, like it's like where this is the story of like Moses, where the Hebrews left Egypt in their exodus to find the promised land of which would become Israel. Which is actually kind of a thing in Xenosaga too, like the idea of
Lost
Ormus.
Jerusalem.
Ormus trying to go back to Lost Jerusalem, where it's like because like after a certain point, the Jews were I think the word is diaspora. They were kind of like they were sent out, like they were kind of rejected from their homeland, so they spread across the world. But like they have this idea of like they want to return to their homeland, and so that's kind of like what Ormus is bringing back.
Yeah, the immigrant fleet and all that stuff.
Yeah,
and the bloodline of the Zohar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and all that stuff.
Yeah, and like that goes into World War II, where like after World War II, Israel was established, and all these people separated from the diaspora could return to their homeland. So that's caused all kinds of problems. But this is religious, not political.
Yeah. Well, there's also that like L's full name is like an anagram of Lucifer, which
like he does have like the horns, right?
Yeah.
I don't know too much about L. I can only assume he just must have played a bigger role.
Yeah, I wish he had played a bigger role. Well, I wish a lot of characters had played a bigger role, but yeah.
I was satisfied with Luxar actually. Like the idea of like the Great One. They're talking about like this Great One and actually there's a lot of almost Xenosaga drops, like the Samarian ships look very much like Abel's Ark.
Yeah, there's a couple of Xenosaga references in Xenoblade, like for example, Zanza's final Monado looks like Abel's Ark.
Yeah.
And there's also Cosmos, the Cosmos outfit that Elma gets.
Yeah.
And
like, those are more aesthetic, but I feel like the but I feel like my whole argument about like trying to tie Xenoblade into Xenosaga revolves around the Samarians actually. This idea, because I think that Xenoblade X is like Xenoblade 1's world, like thousands and thousands of years in the future. There's a couple points, but this isn't theory.
Yeah, that was one of the theories.
I think that there is substantial evidence for that theory, even though it's pretty light. X doesn't have a lot of substantial content, so when it comes to its story, so you have to make do what you can.
Also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I read somewhere that I think it was the Reclaimers, like in the Japanese version, they were actually called Testament.
Yes,
really,
that is correct.
Did not know that.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
they changed and Nintendo of America had to change it or something like that.
Yeah, they did. It was and then also scales were dolls and yeah.
Which is exactly what I think about the character models in Xenosaga 1. They look like stuffed dolls.
They have not aged well.
It's got the early PS2 potato faces.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's fine for what it is. They got better over time. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of biased, I guess, because Xenosaga 1 I really like. So
yeah. No, I like 1 a lot too. It's just a matter like I do like whenever I see like the facial animation, like it looks very clear. Like the textures actually look better than Xenoblade 1, but it's just they feel like dolls feel it, basically.
Well, if you go in like the ODM, because I'm bringing that up again, and the ODM, it's got some scenes where it's just like frame by frame, some of the drawings, and it's just like the drawings look so good, and then the 3D software rendering that they used is just like, oh god, why?
Yeah,
the art was amazing. Like some of the actual drawings, I don't know, but like it did not translate well.
I think it's kind of Hiko Tanaka's curse. Like they kind of did a better job with his designs in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, but X and Xenosaga Episode 1, they just didn't turn out as good as the artwork.
Yeah. Well, I like the I like one's aesthetic, but that wasn't done by the same artist. I don't think one had an artist really, but
no, it didn't.
Like one has like one's art style is very like a paint like aesthetic kind of, and like that's you see a lot of that in the concept art, but that's also in the environment design as well. It's very kind of like it feels like a painty type feel.
Yeah.
Which I guess makes sense because if painting's a lot more like straight lines and like a little bit more jaggedy, so that would make sense for the Wii's hardware. So turning a weakness into a strength. But like X does handle some topics like the Great One, and like we're joking, like you guys were joking, like Vita is like the name of the PlayStation, but I think even in the PlayStation Vita's announcement, they said that Vita means life or something like that.
Yeah, that was like the whole thing.
Vita's life. I think it's Spanish, right?
Looking Vita translation to English. I see Italian. It's one of the romantic languages.
I mean, like, yeah, it all like derives from like the same kind of thing. I think Spanish they spell it a little bit differently. I think it's with a D, but yeah, it looks like it's coming from Italian.
Well, you have to understand. The romantic languages are Portuguese, Romanian, Italian, Spanish. I think maybe I already mentioned that. French. Basically, those 5 languages they all have very similar roots. So they're basically all.
Well, that's what I just said. Like they all kind of come from the same thing.
Exactly, they all come from Latin. So. Yeah. And then 2, Xenoblade. So X, like it has more references than like there's the cathedral, and like there's the girl who kind of like starts worshiping like the bringer of miracles, right?
Yeah.
And I've always liked that side quest because it gives you it lets you voice your own opinion on it, because it's like, what do you think? Like, do you think about some like higher power, and then like the choices you get are like you believe that there is like a higher power out there somewhere, and then you can also deny it. And of course, I'm Catholic, so I always agree to that. But I just think it's that kind of thing is super cool.
Yeah, I like some of the dialogue choices don't really affect anything in X, but I do like how it's the dialogue options are set up.
Yeah, I have some issues with how the system is made, but the execution on the options are either like super interesting or super funny. Like
yeah, they're funny. Like
there's
playing the saddest violin or smallest violin or something.
Yeah,
like that
I have that. Yeah, or the other one where the Manon is going around and it's like and he finds the girl in love, and then he's like, do you feel this feeling too? And one of the options that the kids say is explain that you are cold and dead inside.
Yes. I think that's what I chose, and I was playing as a Cosmos character. So I was like, yeah, that's what Cosmos would say.
Yeah.
The dialogue choices were really funny in X. People did not give that game.
Yeah, X is some legitimately good humor. I think when people think X is humor, they think Tatsu, but like L was legitimately funny. Alexa was legitimately funny.
Yeah.
Yes.
What was the thing L said about the horse? He had a line about he had I'd have to look it up. He had a line about a horse, and I was just like, I heard that for the first time. I was like, what?
Well, I know he made that phrase ass caves, or like instead of asshole, he misinterpreted it as like ass cave or something like that. But yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I didn't feel like it was like as much in the forefront, which is fine.
Yeah.
It's totally cool.
And then just to kind of wrap this up, there's Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Which that like Xenoblade Chronicles 2 has like a lot of references to like mythology, like the world trees, probably a reference to the Yggdrasil. There's actually like there's a lot of mythology in like X, I think, too. Like there's a lot of reference to Norse, but there's a lot like toward the end game. There's a lot of references to like Christian, like monotheistic religion. The major point I want to bring up is the Trinity core. So
yeah, that's a big one.
So whenever people try to dissect this, they always seem to take it as as like taking each part individually. So pneuma roughly translated means like spirit or breath. Ontos means like logic or speech. Not ontos means being, sorry, and logos means logic or speech. But the other way you could interpret it is, so pneuma represents the Holy Spirit, logos represents Jesus, and ontos kind of represents the Holy Father. It's weird. Ontos means being, so, or it can also translate to God roughly, but it's mostly used in like the word is mostly used in like ontological arguments where like you try and like prove God as like the highest being in existence. Ontological arguments have been around for thousands of years. In the Japanese version, though, it uses the word oisia, which means substance or essence, and basically in Christianity that is the idea that the Holy Trinity is everything is same in essence and everything is balanced. It's weird that they use that as like the third core because but yeah, I actually have the Greek definitions here. Ontos is more, it means like being, that, and which is, and oisia is to be and I am. And the I am is I actually want to bring attention to because whenever I am is commonly used as a definition for God. So
yeah, like the great I am.
Yeah, exactly.
I've seen like that.
I am who I am. That's it's referenced in the Gospels. It's referenced in Exodus. It's very much a central, like it's a central part of understanding God. Is like this idea that I am. Yeah, and then yeah. So, do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I didn't think of the Trinity thing before, but I should have.
Yeah, no, I like.
It's like so obvious when you say it now. It's like, oh, yes,
Yeah.
but, yeah. I just kind of like, I think I was too busy trying to figure out the connections to Xenoblade 1 to even think about that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah.
Yeah, and like there's also like this is the first time since Xenosaga where like they kind of reference like this idea of like this character believing in this like this higher, like Klaus is like heavily implied to be like Christian. I think in the Japanese version he says like he's receiving retribution from God, but in the English version he says retribution from on high.
Mm-hmm.
I just find that interesting. Like Klaus, like this God character in Xenoblade 1, could also be like this theist in 2.
Yeah, it wasn't also like the architect referred to as God in the Japanese version?
I think so.
Which I guess it's
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know that one.
Yeah, there was something about that because because I remember watching a video where it was a while ago, so I don't remember all of it, but I was watching a video where they were breaking down the localization changes, and apparently and apparently there was something about that where it wasn't so much that they were trying to change the fact that it was like a deity, but they just kind of made it a little bit less obvious.
Yeah,
sure.
I think I watched that same video.
Which I don't think is a bad thing per se, especially in such like a religiously kind of like divisive and also free country as like America or like the European countries or whatever. I don't think it's a bad thing as long as you don't remove the content entirely.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But yeah, and then the idea, like this idea, like there is like it's Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is the most Christian, like is definitely the most like pro-Christian one I feel in the entire series.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of like relationship with God stuff ideas and the Trinity. It's all.
Yeah, and that was kind of like the whole thing with it was that that was kind of the world where God was actively trying to help them.
Yeah. And also, I do find it interesting how Logos or Malus is representative of Jesus, and he's the main villain. But on the other hand, you also have the line where Klaus mentions that it was representative of the ego of those who named him. If you remember that.
I do.
That's the scene where Malus first comes to the World Tree and he first meets Klaus when they're still all in shade. And he's like, Logos, what's it mean, Logos? And Klaus responds with, it means nothing. it is the representative of the ego of the ones who named you, which is possibly another reference to the "ye shall be as gods" thing, because they thought they could they could create these cores that could emulate the Trinity. Yeah. There's also a bunch of proverbs here. Like, I'm just gonna open up, like, other things that happen in the world tree. Proverb 8 and 9 is, "Hear, my son, your father's instruction, and reject not your mother's teaching. A graceful diadem will they be for your head, a torque for your neck." So basically, it's saying like, hear your father's instruction, reject not your mother's teaching, and they will be like ones who will protect you. Also, Numa, her inscription on her outfit is Proverb chapter 4 verse 18 is but the path of the just is like shining light and grows in the brilliance till perfect day, which in the context where you first see that in the scene where it's like glowing and Numa is all like shiny green is perfect. And then the Trinity core actually has a couple inscriptions, one for Logos and maybe one for Ontos. The one for Logos is Proverbs chapter 10, verse 12. Verse 12 is, hatred stirs up disputes, but love covers up all offenses. So basically, like, don't hate, only love. And then Ontos is chapter 3. Well, this is the Reddit thread that I found for this. They were a little uncertain about this, but Ontos could be chapter 13, verse 13, which is, let me get there. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 13 is, happy the man who finds wisdom, the man who gains understanding. So that's just a bunch of, and the proverbs are like ways to live like morally in like union with God. That's like why they were written. So the fact that these like are written to embody like the different parts of the Aegises or the Trinity cores is very interesting, at least.
Yeah, that is really interesting.
I hadn't considered a lot of Xenoblade 2's like Christian themes when I first played it. But there's a lot. I feel like there's definitely more like Christianity in it, I feel like, than Xenoblade 1.
Well, another thing is that the Japanese name for the Aegises roughly means something along the line of Holy Grail.
Yes, that was one of the things that they changed in translation. I remember reading about that.
It feels kind of weird that they changed all that stuff for Xenoblade 2.
Like, they didn't like quite change it because Aegis is still like a mythological term.
It still makes sense. Like I said before, it wasn't so much that they changed it. They just kind of modified it so that it's not as obvious and not as in your face about it.
It's like Deus all over again, though, and I don't really mind that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they kind of do that with a lot of that in Xenoblade 2, like Pyra and Mithra. Their names aren't they? I don't remember if they are more. Is that more Greek or?
Pyra. I never looked. I just know that they're like more stylized version of Homura and Hikari, which are their Japanese names.
Yeah, and then Poppy, and Hana is flower in Japanese, and Poppy is a type of flower. So I mean, I kind of feel like it seems unnecessary to do that, but at the same time, they basically mean the same thing. So
I would just
not really.
The only thing I would want is clarification on the difference between clarification on why they changed Ontos to Owesia, because it just seems Owesia is like such a, because like Owesia doesn't even like directly mean, it just is the root of a word that means like the same in substance for the Trinity. So it strike like I didn't even know about this till last night, and I'm just like, why did they change it? But
and I guess it's also worth mentioning that Elysium, the Japanese word is Rakuen, which kind of translates to Eden or paradise.
Yeah, well, like the story of Elysium is very clearly a reference to the Garden of Eden. Like they tell, like cast out by their creator. And yeah, there's a lot of references to that in Xenoblade 2, and while it's not quite as overt, it feels like they're getting more comfortable bringing that kind of content back into Xenoblade, which makes me really excited for their next project, because they've brought back the Zohar, they've brought back all these ideas, so where are they going from here?
Yes.
It's kind of weird that, like, Xenosaga, it doesn't feel like they changed that much.
Yeah.
Localization. Even though they did censor a lot of Xenosaga, they didn't really change that part of it that much.
Yeah. It's mostly the violence and...
But I don't understand how Albedo cutting off his head with a knife to Albedo ripping his head off is any different.
Right. I feel like ripping his head off is kind of worse, but I like that. That's like probably my favorite censorship of the series.
It's kind of funny because, like, Namco, they recently did, like, a similar kind of censorship in one of the Tales games of Berseria.
Berseria.
Yeah, Berseria. So there's a scene early on where a little boy gets stabbed with, like, a sword, and then they changed that to, like, the guy does this weird magic move where he, like, sends a boy into the air, and then, like, these two, like, magic blades come and cut him. It's, like, it makes no sense.
What?
Yeah, look it up.
It was,
I don't think I fully processed that.
Yeah.
I would probably watch a video. It's
kind
of weird.
It's on YouTube. It's really ridiculous.
But anyway.
Yeah. I mean, that's where we are at this point.
Wow. Yeah, that was a discussion.
I'm happy.
Time.
Yeah.
I'm sure
I'm super happy about that.
Sorry, I talked for a lot of it, but I just have I have a lot to
say.
say.
That's why you're here, man. We want to hear what you say.
Yeah, it's all worth it.
I would mostly hear it, listen.
I'm really excited for you to get through Saga, though.
Yeah,
I think you're really gonna enjoy it.
Yeah, I'll keep you guys updated on that.
Yes, I'd like to check your progress.
Yeah, I'll probably... I have a friend in Australia who is probably going to play Saga 2 around the same... We're probably going to start around December, so... because Saga 2 is the only one released outside of North America and Japan.
So dumb. Why is that
weird.
A thing?
Yeah, but we're gonna try and play that at the same pace, so that should be fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think I played the Saga games in the winter originally. It was like my freshman year of college, and I remember just playing it. I think it was around winter break. I just remember it like being really snowy outside, and then like playing Saga 3. That's what I remember.
That's a good good weather
feeling.
for Saga 3. Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
Well, just Saga in general.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right. Well, are we ready to wrap?
There's not.
Oh, sorry.
And I guess you could say like Torna doesn't really have a ton of it either. It's very much a side story.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really think.
And that was the thing. That was the kind of stuff that I was hoping that it would kind of elaborate on in Torna.
They did a lot of like the religious corruption. Oh yeah, there's the entirety of Indal.
Oh, Torna.
Indal. There's Indal and Torna and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Indal is very much like bringing back idea of organized religion, and I like how it's not that the religion is bad. It's just the people running it are bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I kind of wish they had gone more into that, but it kind of like felt like they kind of threw it in, kind of like the conclusion to that at the end, and
yeah, like there was like this whole narrative, and then like at the end of Torna, they were just like, all right, here's a bunch of these threads that connect it to the main game, and I'm just like, what?
But do you think that? Sorry, I was gonna say, like, do you think that Amalthus is maybe even like just another allusion to the Icarus story?
Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because he literally climbed the tree and got to God.
He's climbing up the tree trying to get
for certain. Like again, this is Xenoblade has actually kind of integrated the second idea of the "you shall be as gods." Like the Xenogears and Xenosaga have "you shall be as gods" is like what happens when you get too close. But Xenoblade has kind of started, especially Xenoblade 2 and 1. They there's this classic phrase in the Bible that's also kind of Zen, where it's talking about like the exalted shall be humbled and the humbled shall be exalted. That's kind of like there's a second to that, where like the people who try and fly too close, and then the people who stay humble will be exalted in their own way. That's obviously Shulk. He rejects being the ultimate power, but he still has all this influence and such. So yeah. So much. I'm sure we only covered the top. I'm pretty
sure we've just scraped the top
the
layer.
iceberg.
Yeah. And there's so much you could talk about, the conflicting ideologies of Torna and Indal, and how Indal is also strangely militarized, which kind of sounds like the Crusades and all kinds of stuff. So
yeah,
but
this has been.
It's been good.
Oh, go on.
No, it's been good.
Yeah, this has been a really good discussion. Thank you very much for both you and David for contributing to this episode, because I definitely couldn't have done it without you guys.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
And for anyone listening,
any questions, if you got any questions, just feel free to ask away.
Yeah, and I do recommend people who listen at least try and check out Meeks' channel. I'm not endorsed or sponsored by him in any way, but he just makes really good stuff. And whenever new stuff comes out, I'm always super fascinated. I was really excited for this episode. I'm like, sweet, I'm gonna get to bring up the alchemical origins of Rubido and Negredo, and that really hasn't been brought up. And then he makes this entire hour-long video about the symbolism, and one of the first things he brings up is the process of alchemy and stuff. I'm like, okay.
Well, it's interesting because it actually says it in the database.
Oh, really?
All that stuff. Yeah, in the database, you see, Saga 3's database is very much its own resource as the ODM or Perfect Works or anything that people draw from.
Yeah.
Sure.
So
once you get your hands on it, it's basically Wikipedia for the game before
Sweet.
Wikipedia was a thing.
Oh yeah. No.
Yeah.
No.
There's actually wiki links in there.
Wait, actually,
when well, yeah, you can go into an article and there's links at the bottom to link to other articles within the article, and it's
that's amazing. words that are highlighted that you can go into, and
I love it.
Okay,
it's great.
Yeah, when I bought episode 3 in high school, I remember one time I woke up at 5 a.m. before I went to school, and just for an hour I played episode 3. I didn't do anything but read that database. That's all I did before school. It was great.
Yeah, because you can spend so much time, and then there's the guides on top of that, and it's just there's so much stuff.
Yeah,
and we're not kidding when we say it's long. You can straight up spend the first 1 to 3 hours of the game just.
And it's also I would also be careful when you play it too, because it's also possible to complete the game and not 100%. The database as well, so.
Oh wow, okay. Alright, well I'll probably just use a guide to make sure I get everything. Alright.
Yes. Yeah. Alright.
Good discussion. I had a lot of fun with this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So are we ready to wrap things up?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It's a little late now.
Yeah. Let's try and get this under 3 hours.
Yeah, we're getting pretty close. Alright, well, that's the end of the episode. Is there any, we'll just kind of go around if there's any social media or projects that you're working on. Because I know you, Owen, you actually have your own podcast, that's correct?
Yes, so the people on my Discord, my personal Discord, and we've created what's called the Quest Clear podcast. You can find us on YouTube, and we'll soon be on other podcasting sites as well. We have Twitter at Quest Clearcast, and it's just called the Quest Clear podcast. We take requests for any discussions you want us to talk about. A lot of fun. We just get around and just talk about stuff. The most recent thing that we did was just kind of go over Xenoblade 1 and X for 3.5 hours. So, yeah. So when you get in a discussion with me, we tend to go long. I also have my own personal Twitter. I'm at LegoDog2001. Typically, I'm just LegoDog2001 or ODog around the internet. But my real name's Owen. I'm currently working also on a game project called Project Hydrant. Sorry. I haven't really released too many details about it. If you want information, it'll be my Twitter. But basically, it's a game project I'm working on. It's an RPG. I hope to have a demo by early next year. So yeah.
Yeah, and I also remember you mentioned you're going to have an episode with your priest.
Yes,
right?
yes. Come.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, come January, I will be doing a interview with my priest about Xenoblade specifically, about like how you interpret different things. And he was actually the one who alerted me to the idea of, it's actually the Trinity and Logos means Jesus. I'm like, I should probably look into this because I was one of the people who had looked at each piece individually. So yeah,
nice.
So yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, that's about all I got on my end.
Well, I look forward to it.
Cool.
Okay. David, you can. Is there anything you'd like to?
Just
mention?
my Twitter. You can follow me. I don't do much on it, but I repost a lot of Xeno art from various fan artists. So, but yeah, I'm at Trombone-san. That's it. And
okay.
I'm not really involved in any projects or anything. I've done this twice. That's fun.
Yes. Yes, you're
the first recurring guest.
Yes, you're a great guest. Okay, Justin?
So there's actually not a whole lot going on with me. I will be at Anime NYC. That is later this month. Takes place in, obviously, NYC.
So far away.
That should be...
so far away.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, that should be a fun time. It's powered by Crunchyroll. If you happen to be in New Jersey or New York, I highly recommend checking it out. There should be a lot I think there's actually going to be a ramen summit there. I know they had one last year, but if they have one this year, I will totally go and eat some delicious
Sounds
ramen.
amazing. I'm starving right now.
Now, is that...
But if you happen to recognize me there, I don't know how, feel free to say hi to me, and I will say hi back.
That was the same event you mentioned in the last Xenogears episode, right?
No? That was actually a different one. So, okay. Here's what went down.
Uh-oh.
So last year, there was Anime NYC, which is what they're having this year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think New York Comic-Con wanted a piece of that pie, so they started their own anime convention with Anime Expo. They collaborated and created a new convention called Anime Fest at NYCC X Anime Expo. And that was last month, during the same weekend as New York Comic-Con. So yeah, there's two anime conventions in New York. It's really confusing, but yeah, that's what's going on right now. So they're having two events. So if you're really into anime and you live in this area, conventions are up and coming. They're all over the place. There's also another one called DerpyCon that's in Jersey. And I believe that used to be about My Little Ponies, but now it's like branched off to all sorts of other anime. So that's also happening this month too. I don't know if I'm going to that yet, but it's happening.
Okay. Well, hopefully we'll have this episode out so we can actually advertise for you.
Yeah, right?
Instead of, always posting this and then it's like, it's already passed.
Right.
All right, and then I'm at Cosmos Chaos on Twitter, and there's not really much for me to plug. I sometimes work on Xeno projects, but not so much lately, and I'll leave it at that.
Cool.
All right, well, thanks again for all of you for joining me. I really enjoyed our discussion. So thank you very much for being here tonight.
It's no problem, man.
Yep, that was a lot of fun.
It was.
All right, well, you all have a good night.
Thanks, you too.
All right.
Take care, everyone.